It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, one of those days that felt so ordinary you could almost forget you were alive. The air was crisp, the kind that bites just enough to make you crave something warm. I'd been running errands all morning and decided to stop by a small cafe that I hadn't visited in years. It was tucked away on a side street, the kind of place that feels like it exists outside of time. Wooden tables, faded wallpaper, the hum of an old espresso machine. I used to come here with Emma, my wife. Back then, it was our little escape from the world. Funny how things change. I walked in, letting the familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee wash over me. My plan was simple: grab a latte, take a moment to breathe, and then head home. But life, as it turns out, had other plans. As I waited in line, my eyes wandered across the room. That's when I saw her, Emma, sitting at a table near the window. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. What were the odds? But then I noticed she wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man, someone I didn't recognize. He was leaning in, speaking softly, his hand resting casually on the table, too close to hers. I froze. My mind raced to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a business meeting? A friend I hadn't met? But deep down, I knew. I knew because of the way she smiled at him, a smile I hadn't seen in years. The kind of smile that spoke of secrets and shared moments. The kind of smile that wasn't meant for me anymore. I should have turned around and left. I should have walked away and spared myself the pain. But instead, I found myself moving toward them, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself was trying to hold me back. I stopped a few feet away, close enough to hear fragments of their conversation. She was laughing, her voice light and carefree. He leaned closer, brushing a strand of her hair back behind her ear. My stomach churned, and a bitter taste rose in my throat. This wasn't just innocent. This was something else entirely. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out an old receipt I'd stuffed in there earlier. On the back, I scrawled a simple note with the pen I'd borrowed from the counter. For words that carried all the weight of my shattered trust. Don't come home tonight. I walked up to their table. Her laughter stopped abruptly when she saw me. Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, the entire cafe seemed to hold its breath. I didn't look at the man. He didn't matter to me. I placed the note gently in front of her, meeting her gaze with all the composure I could muster. "Enjoy your coffee," I said, my voice calm and cold. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out, leaving her frozen in place. As I stepped back onto the street, the world felt different. The air was heavier, the noise of passing cars distant. I didn't know where I was going or what came next, but one thing was certain. My life, as I knew it, had just come to an end. And that was only the beginning. I walked aimlessly down the street, gripping my phone tightly in my hand as if it were some kind of anchor. My mind was racing, yet everything around me seemed to blur into the background. I must have wandered for hours before I finally found myself sitting in my car, parked in a lot with no memory of how I got there. The crumpled receipt from the cafe was still in my pocket, the ink from my note smeared slightly from where my fingers had gripped it too hard. Don't come home tonight. I had meant it. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear her excuses or explanations. I needed space to think, to process the fact that my wife, my Emma, had been sitting there with another man, laughing like he was her entire world. The betrayal burned, sharper than I'd ever imagined it could. As night fell, I decided to drive. I wasn't going home, not yet, but I couldn't just sit there. The silence was suffocating. I ended up at the one place that had always felt safe, the lake. It was where Emma and I used to go when we first started dating. We'd spend hours sitting on the old wooden dock, talking about everything and nothing. But tonight, the memories felt like a cruel joke. I parked near the shore and stepped out, the cool night air biting at my skin. The water was still, reflecting the moonlight like a giant mirror. For a moment, I let myself hope that I'd wake up and find out this was all some terrible dream. But reality had a way of clinging to me, refusing to let go. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. I hesitated before looking at the screen. It was Emma. Of course it was. She called 3 times already, left 2 voicemails, and sent a flurry of texts, all of which I had ignored. But this time, something compelled me to read what she'd written. "Mark, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like. Just come home, and we'll talk. Please." Not what it looks like. The words made me laugh bitterly. That line was so overused it felt almost insulting. But I wasn't ready to engage with her. Not yet. Instead, I typed a single reply. "I told you not to come home. Don't test me." I hit send and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, the tension in my chest easing just slightly. For the first time in hours, I felt like I had control over something. She couldn't twist this narrative, couldn't manipulate me into believing it was all some kind of misunderstanding. I stayed at the lake for hours, staring out at the water and replaying the scene at the cafe over and over in my mind. By the time I finally got back in my car, it was nearly midnight. I didn't know where I was going to sleep, but one thing was certain. I wasn't ready to face Emma. Not yet. When I finally pulled up to our house, I noticed something strange. The lights were on, and her car was in the driveway. My heart sank. She had ignored my note. She had come home. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to drive away, to avoid whatever confrontation was waiting for me inside. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being blindsided, decided it was time to face her. I stepped out of the car, my steps heavy as I approached the front door. It was slightly ajar, and my stomach twisted. Something felt off. I pushed it open cautiously, the creak echoing through the silent house. "Emma?" I called out, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. There was no answer. I walked into the living room, and that's when I saw it. A suitcase, half-packed, sitting on the floor. Next to it was a pile of crumpled clothes and a shattered picture frame. The photo of our wedding day stared back at me, the glass broken into a web of cracks. And then I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps coming from upstairs. My heart pounded as I made my way toward the staircase, each step feeling heavier than the last. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but whatever it was, I knew it wouldn't be good. When I reached the top, I saw her. Emma stood in the doorway of our bedroom, her phone pressed to her ear. She froze when she saw me, her face pale as if she'd seen a ghost. "Mark," she stammered, quickly ending the call. I didn't think you'd be home." I crossed my arms, my gaze cold and unyielding. "Clearly. Who were you talking to?" Her lips parted as if to answer, but no words came out. Instead, she stepped back, her eyes darting toward the suitcase on the floor behind her. And that's when I realized she wasn't just ignoring my note. She was preparing to leave. "Who is he, Emma?" I demanded, my voice louder now, filled with a fury I could no longer contain. "Who's the man you were with today?" For a moment, she didn't answer. She just stood there, her eyes brimming with tears that I couldn't tell were real or part of some desperate attempt to gain sympathy. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think," she said. "Just let me explain." But I wasn't interested in explanations, not tonight. Not after everything I'd seen. The only thing I wanted now was the truth, and I wasn't leaving until I got it. Her words, "let me explain," hung in the air like a weak excuse for a storm she couldn't control. I stood there, staring at her, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. Every instinct told me to turn around and walk away, but something darker, a need to finally know the truth, rooted me to the spot. "Explain," I said sharply, crossing my arms as I leaned against the doorway. My voice was cold, as steady as I could make it, even though my insides felt like they were being torn apart. Emma looked down, her lips trembling as she struggled to speak. "Mark, it's not what I think." I cut her off, my voice rising. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. I saw you. I saw the way you looked at him. So don't stand here and insult my intelligence." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. She took a step closer, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Stay right there," I warned. "You've already crossed enough lines for one day." She froze, tears pooling in her eyes. For a moment, I thought I saw regret in her expression, but it was hard to tell anymore. I couldn't trust anything about her. Not her words, Not her emotions, not even her tears. Who is he? I asked, my voice firmer now. Who's the guy you were with today? Emma hesitated, her hands twisting nervously. He's just a friend, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. A friend? I repeated, letting the word linger like a bad taste in my mouth. That's the best you've got? A friend who brushes your hair out of your face and makes you laugh like you're in high school? Do you think I'm stupid, Emma? Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might break down completely. But instead, she straightened her shoulders and met my gaze with a defiance I hadn't expected. Fine, she snapped. You want the truth? He's someone I've been seeing, someone who actually listens to me, someone who makes me feel alive again. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I staggered back a step, the weight of her confession threatening to crush me. Alive again? As if the life we'd built together, our years of love, laughter, and struggles, meant nothing. Alive again? I echoed, my voice shaking with anger. What about me, Emma? What about the man who's been standing by you for 12 years? The man who's worked his ass off to build a life for us? Was I not enough for you? She looked away, tears streaming down her face. It's not about you, Mark, she said softly. It's about me. I needed something more. More, I repeated bitterly. So you decided to sneak around behind my back instead of talking to me? Instead of giving me a chance to fix whatever was wrong? Do you have any idea how much you've hurt me? Her silence was deafening, and in that moment, I realized the truth. Emma didn't care about how much she'd hurt me. She cared about herself, about her needs, her desires. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. The sight of her standing there, so full of excuses and self-pity, was too much to bear. But as I started to walk out of the room, something caught my eye, a phone sitting on the nightstand. Not her usual phone. This one was different. What's that? I asked, pointing to it. Emma's face went pale. It's nothing, she said quickly, stepping in front of it as if to shield it from view. It's not nothing, I said, my voice dangerously low. Give it to me. Mark, please, she begged. But I wasn't in the mood for begging. I stepped around her and grabbed the phone before she could stop me. The screen was locked, but the notifications told me everything I needed to know. Messages from someone named Brian. Dozens of them. Brian? I said, holding up the phone. Is this him? Emma didn't answer, but the look on her face said it all. My blood boiled as I scrolled through the messages. The ones I could see were filled with things I wished I could unsee. Plans to meet up, flirtatious comments, even photos. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me it had been far too long. A few months, she admitted finally, but it didn't mean anything, Mark. I swear. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean anything? You don't meet someone in secret for months if it doesn't mean anything. You don't send messages like that if it doesn't mean anything. Emma started to cry again, but I wasn't moved. Her tears didn't feel real to me anymore. They felt like a shield, a way to deflect blame and avoid responsibility. I can't do this, I said, shaking my head. I can't stay here and pretend like everything's fine. Mark, please, she begged, reaching for me, but I stepped back. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, or counseling? I interrupted, my voice filled with disbelief. You think counseling is going to fix this? You think sitting in a room and talking about your betrayal is going to make me forget what you've done? She didn't answer, and I didn't wait for her to. I turned and walked out of the room, my mind made up. This wasn't something I could forgive, not now, not ever. As I headed down the stairs, I felt a strange sense of clarity. My marriage was over, but my life wasn't. What I didn't realize was that Emma wasn't finished yet. She had one more move to make, one that would take her betrayal to a whole new level. I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing in the still night. My chest felt like it was on fire, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me with every step I took. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get as far away from her as possible. My mind replayed everything. Her confession, the texts, her tears that now felt hollow. The woman I'd trusted with my heart had shattered it into pieces. I ended up at my friend Matt's house. He was the kind of guy who'd always been there for me, no questions asked. When I showed up unannounced at nearly 1 a.m., he didn't even hesitate. "Mark, what the hell happened?" he asked, letting me in and handing me a beer before I could even explain. I told him everything. From the moment I saw her at the cafe to the suitcase in our room and the phone full of texts from Brian. His face darkened as I spoke, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with quiet anger. "That's messed up, man," he said, shaking his head. "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. Part of me wants to just leave, start over somewhere far away. But the other part, I want answers, Matt. I want to know why she did this. "Sometimes there isn't a good answer," he said simply. "People are selfish. They hurt others without thinking about the consequences. But you don't owe her anything, Mark. She made her choices." His words stuck with me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than she'd admitted. Something about the way she'd reacted to me finding the phone. It didn't add up. What was she hiding? The next day, I decided to confront her again. I couldn't just leave things hanging, not with so many unanswered questions. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was gone. For a moment, I felt relief. I wouldn't have to face her just yet. But that relief was short-lived when I walked inside and found the house eerily empty. The suitcase was gone. The pile of clothes in the living room? Gone. Even her favorite coffee mug was missing from the kitchen counter. It hit me like a ton of bricks. She'd left, not just for the day, but for good. I searched the house, desperate for some kind of clue, something to explain what was happening. That's when I found the envelope on the dining table, addressed to me in her handwriting. My hands trembled as I tore it open, the note inside short but gut-wrenching. "Mark, I can't do this anymore. I need time to figure things out, and I know you do too. Please don't try to find me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. I'm sorry for everything." Emma, I crumpled the note in my hand, anger boiling inside me. Don't try to find me? Who did she think she was? She'd turned my life upside down, and now she thought she could just walk away without facing the consequences? But as the hours passed, anger gave way to something else, curiosity. Where had she gone? Was she with him? And most importantly, what had she meant by, "I'll be in touch when I'm ready"? Ready for what? I had no answers, only questions that gnawed at me relentlessly. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to come back. If she thought she could keep hiding the truth from me, she was wrong. Emma's note left me in a haze of anger and confusion, but also with a fire burning in my chest. I wasn't about to let her walk away without giving me the full story. Her words, "I'll be in touch when I'm ready," felt like a slap in the face. After everything, she still wanted to control the narrative, to dictate when and how this mess would unfold. Not this time. I sat down at the dining table, the empty house around me eerily quiet, and pulled out my phone. If she thought she could just vanish, she clearly underestimated me. I opened the messages on her discarded phone, the one she hadn't taken with her, and began scrolling through the thread with Brian. Most of it was small talk, sprinkled with flirtation that made my stomach churn. But then I found something useful, a hotel name. "Rooms booked for Friday. Can't wait to see you there," one of his texts had said. It was from last week, but if they'd met there before, they might meet there again. It was a stretch, but it was all I had to go on. The next day, I drove to the hotel. It was one of those business-class places, nothing fancy, but private enough for secret rendezvous. I parked in the lot and sat there for a while, staring at the entrance and debating whether this was even worth it. Was I really about to chase her down like this? But then I remembered the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd smiled like I didn't exist. And just like that, my resolve hardened. Inside, the lobby was quiet, with only a few guests milling about. I approached the front desk, my palms sweating, and gave the receptionist my best disarming smile. "Hi, I'm looking for a friend who might have checked in recently," I said, keeping my tone casual. "His name's Brian. Tall guy, brown hair, kind of athletic looking. Would you happen to know if he's staying here?" The receptionist frowned, clearly hesitant. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't disclose guest information. I expected that answer, but I wasn't about to give up so easily. I get it, I said, lowering my voice as if sharing a secret. It's just, I'm supposed to meet him here, but I forgot the room number. He said he'd be waiting for me. If you could just check if he's here, I'd really appreciate it. She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. One moment, she said finally, tapping away at her computer. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. There's no one by that name currently checked in. Disappointment washed over me, but before I could turn away, she added, however, someone with that name did check out 2 days ago. That was something. I thanked her and walked back to my car, my mind racing. 2 days ago. That would have been the day before I found Emma at the cafe. Was she with him that night? Had they planned everything together? My grip on the steering wheel tightened as a new thought occurred to me. What if she wasn't just leaving me for him? What if they'd been plotting something bigger? Back at home, I began piecing things together. The texts, the hotel, the suitcase. It all pointed to a calculated plan, not a spur-of-the-moment decision. But why? What was Emma running from, or running toward? As I sifted through her belongings, hoping to find another clue, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I answered. Mark, Emma's voice came through, hesitant and shaky. I told you not to look for me. I clenched my jaw. And I told you, I'm not letting you run away without answers. Where are you? That doesn't matter, she said quickly. I need you to leave this alone. Please. Her tone was desperate, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Leave it alone? I repeated, my voice sharp. You destroyed our marriage, Emma. You don't get to tell me to leave it alone. You owe me the truth. There was silence on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, uneven and shaky. Finally, she spoke. I can't tell you everything right now. It's not safe. Safe? I asked, confused. What are you talking about? Just trust me, she pleaded. It's better this way. But I didn't trust her. Not anymore. And as the call ended abruptly, leaving me with more questions than answers, I realized something. Emma wasn't just running away from me. She was hiding from something, or someone. Her words, "It's not safe," echoed in my mind long after the call ended. Safe from what? Or who? I sat there in the empty house, the walls seeming to close in on me as I tried to piece it all together. Emma had always been guarded, but this was different. This wasn't just guilt over an affair. There was fear in her voice, and that terrified me more than anything. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd have to find it myself. I went back to her discarded phone, scrolling through the messages with Brian, looking for anything that might give me a lead. That's when I found it. A text I'd overlooked before, buried beneath dozens of flirtatious exchanges. Are you sure he won't find out? This could ruin everything. The message was from Emma, sent 2 weeks ago. My heart raced as I read Brian's response. Relax, I've got it handled. Just stick to the plan. The plan? What plan? My mind spun with possibilities, none of them good. Was this more than just an affair? Were they working together on something? Stealing from me? Setting me up? My chest tightened as paranoia crept in, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed answers, not wild theories. I decided to go back to the hotel. If Brian had checked out 2 days ago, maybe someone there had seen something, or someone. This time, I wouldn't be relying on polite questions. I'd get the information I needed, no matter what. When I arrived, the receptionist from before was gone, replaced by a younger guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Perfect. I approached the desk, putting on my best concerned husband act. Hey man, I began, leaning in slightly. I was here the other day, looking for my wife. I think she might have been staying here with a friend. It's kind of an emergency. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't seem particularly interested. I can't give out guest information. Look, I said, lowering my voice. I'm not asking for names. I just need to know if anyone remembers seeing her. Blonde, about this tall, probably with a guy. It's really important. The guy hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was watching. Finally, he sighed. I can't promise anything, but one of the cleaning staff mentioned something strange the other day. A couple checked out in a hurry, left the room a mess, barely spoke a word. She said they looked nervous, like they were trying to get out of here fast. My pulse quickened. Did they leave anything behind? Anything at all? He shrugged. You'd have to ask housekeeping. They usually bring lost items to the back office. I thanked him and headed toward the office, my heart pounding. When I explained the situation to the manager, she reluctantly agreed to let me look through the lost and found. It was mostly junk. Phone chargers, sunglasses, a paperback novel. But then I saw it. A black leather notebook, worn at the edges. My hands shook as I flipped it open, the pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. Emma's handwriting. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe a diary entry, some kind of confession, but what I found was far worse. The notebook was full of numbers, names, and dates. Transactions. Payments. It looked like some kind of ledger, but the details didn't make sense. Why would Emma have something like this? And why was Brian involved? At the back of the notebook, I found a folded piece of paper tucked into the binding. It was a photocopy of what looked like a contract. The names on it sent a chill down my spine. Emma's, Brian's, and mine. I stuffed the notebook into my jacket and left the hotel as fast as I could. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just an affair. Whatever they were involved in, it was bigger than I'd imagined. And somehow, I was tied to it. Back in my car, I opened the notebook again, studying the entries more closely. One name kept appearing, Redwood Consulting. I'd never heard of it before, but it was listed next to several payments, all for large sums of money. I pulled out my phone and searched the name. The results were unsettling. Redwood Consulting wasn't a real company. It was a front, linked to fraud cases, money laundering, even blackmail. My stomach churned as I realized what this meant. Emma wasn't just cheating on me. She and Brian were using my name for something illegal. And now, I was caught in the middle of it. As I sat there, trying to process everything, my phone buzzed. It was another unknown number. My hand trembled as I answered. Mark, the voice on the other end said, low and menacing. If you want to stay safe, stop digging. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the dial tone still ringing in my ears. The voice was calm but unmistakably threatening. If you want to stay safe, stop digging. The words repeated in my head, each one more chilling than the last. Someone knew I was looking into this, and they wanted me to back off. But backing off wasn't an option. Not now. Not when I was finally starting to piece things together. I sat in my car, clutching the notebook like it was a lifeline. My name was all over the transactions, tied to something I didn't even know existed. Emma and Brian had dragged me into something dark, and whoever had called clearly didn't want me poking around. I drove home, my thoughts racing. The house felt colder than ever, its silence now laced with paranoia. I locked the doors and double-checked the windows before sitting down at the kitchen table. I needed to figure out my next move, but first, I had to understand what I was up against. I flipped through the notebook again, focusing on the payments. They were all recent, within the past 6 months, and all tied to Redwood Consulting. One entry stood out, a payment scheduled for the following day. It wasn't just a name and a number, it included an address. My stomach churned as I wrote it down. If I wanted answers, this was the place to start. But something told me I wasn't going to like what I found. The next morning, I parked a block away from the address. It was a nondescript office building, the kind you'd walk past without a second glance. I sat in the car, watching for any sign of Emma or Brian. The street was quiet, almost too quiet, and every passing moment made me feel more exposed. Finally, I got out and approached the building. The glass doors were unlocked, and the lobby was empty. A directory on the wall listed several businesses, but Redwood Consulting wasn't one of them. That didn't surprise me. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't meant to be public. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, where the payment address was listed. The hallway was dimly lit, the carpet worn and stained. At the end of the hall, I found the door, unmarked, with no sign of what was behind it. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but I couldn't. Not now. I opened the door to find a small, cluttered office. Desks were piled with papers, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and dust. A man sat behind one of the desks, his back to me, talking on the phone. He didn't notice me at first, giving me a chance to look around. That's when I saw it, a photo of Emma on the desk, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. My blood ran cold. "Can I help you?" the man asked, turning around. His face went pale the moment he saw me, and I realized he wasn't just surprised. He was scared. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping closer. "What is this place?" He hesitated, glancing toward the door like he was considering running. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice trembling. "This has nothing to do with you." "Doesn't it?" I snapped, slamming the notebook onto the desk. "My name's in here. My wife dragged me into whatever this is, so don't tell me it has nothing to do with me." The man's eyes widened as he looked at the notebook. "You're Mark," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You need to leave. Now." "Not until you tell me what's going on," I said, my voice firm. "What is Redwood Consulting? And what do Emma and Brian have to do with it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the phone and dialed a number, his hands shaking. "We've got a problem," he said into the receiver. "He's here." Before I could react, two men appeared in the doorway, blocking my exit. Their faces were cold, expressionless. And that's when I realized I'd just stepped into something far bigger than I'd imagined. The moment I saw the two men blocking the doorway, my gut clenched. These weren't office workers or security guards. They moved too smoothly, too confidently. I knew the look of men who had done this before, and I knew I was in trouble. The man behind the desk, his name tag read L. Carter, kept his eyes down, like he wanted no part in what was about to happen. But I didn't have that luxury. One of the men stepped forward, tall, broad, his voice low and even. "You need to come with us." I forced myself to stay calm. "And if I don't?" The second man pulled back his jacket just enough to reveal the handle of a gun tucked into his waistband. Okay, so that was the game. Carter exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Look, Mark, you're in way over your head. This isn't what you think it is." I let out a bitter laugh. "Really?" Because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot like my wife and her boyfriend are running some kind of scam using my name. And now you people want me to stop asking questions? I shook my head. Not happening. The first man moved closer, towering over me. "It's not a request." My brain was moving a mile a minute. I had no idea where they wanted to take me, and I wasn't interested in finding out. But there were two of them, and they were armed. If I made the wrong move, this wouldn't end well. I needed to think. Fast. So I did the only thing I could. I played dumb. I sighed heavily and put my hands up. "All right. Fine. But at least tell me where we're going." The men exchanged a glance before the taller one nodded toward the hallway. "Downstairs." I followed them out, my heart pounding. Every step felt like a countdown to something I couldn't see yet. As we passed the receptionist's desk, I spotted a security camera in the corner of the lobby. Perfect. We stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. A black SUV idled by the curb. My stomach twisted. If I got in that car, I had no idea if I'd be coming back out. I needed to act. Now. I stumbled forward suddenly, clutching my chest. "Wait," I gasped. I don't feel so." And then I dropped. It wasn't my best performance, but it didn't need to be. As soon as my knees hit the pavement, one of them swore and bent down. That was my opening. I swung my fist up with everything I had, catching him in the throat. He stumbled back, choking. The other guy reached for his gun, but I was already moving. I grabbed the closest thing I could, my car keys, and jammed them into his wrist before he could draw. He shouted in pain, giving me just enough time to bolt. I sprinted toward my car, throwing myself into the driver's seat and slamming the door shut. The men recovered fast, and I saw them rushing toward me in the rearview mirror. One of them reached for something, maybe a weapon, maybe a phone. I didn't wait to find out. I hit the gas. Tires screeched as I peeled out of the lot, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I didn't slow down, didn't check if they were following. I just drove. It wasn't until I was several miles away, parked behind an abandoned gas station, that I finally let myself breathe. My hands were shaking. I had gotten lucky. this time. But they weren't going to let this go. I pulled out my phone and stared at Emma's last message. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. She knew. She knew this was dangerous. And now, I knew it too. This wasn't just about cheating. This was about survival. And I wasn't done yet. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My pulse was still racing from what had just happened. I had barely escaped, but for how long? Emma had dragged me into something dangerous, something I didn't fully understand yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I needed to end this. I pulled out my phone and called the only person I could trust, Matt. Mark? Where the hell have you been? He answered on the first ring. I've been trying to reach you all day. No time to explain, I said, my voice firm. I need your help. Meet me at my place in an hour. I didn't wait for him to respond. I ended the call, started the car, and headed home. When I arrived, the house was dark. But something felt off. I stepped inside cautiously, scanning the room. Everything looked the same, except for one thing. The smell of Emma's perfume lingered in the air. She had been here. I tensed, listening carefully. A soft creak came from upstairs. I grabbed the closest thing I could, a metal flashlight, and moved silently up the stairs. My heart pounded as I reached the bedroom door. It was slightly open. I pushed it wider, and there she was. Emma stood near the bed, her face pale, her hands trembling. She flinched when she saw me. Mark, she whispered. You weren't supposed to be here. I stepped inside, my grip on the flashlight tightening. Neither were you. She exhaled shakily. I needed to grab a few things. I didn't think you'd come back so soon. I narrowed my eyes. Cut the crap, Emma. I know everything. She went still. Everything? I pulled out her notebook from my jacket and tossed it onto the bed. Redwood Consulting. The fake transactions. The contract with my name on it. The texts with Brian. You set me up. Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't falling for them this time. Mark, you don't understand. I took a step closer. Then explain. You owe me that much. She swallowed hard. Then, finally, she spoke. It started as a way to make money, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Brian had connections. He told me we could funnel money through fake accounts, launder it. At first, it was just small amounts. But then, we needed a clean name. Someone with no criminal record. My stomach dropped. So you used me. Emma winced. We never meant to hurt you, Mark. I swear. But things got out of control. We owed people, dangerous people. I clenched my jaw. So what was the plan? Let them come after me instead? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought if I left, they'd leave you alone. I thought I could fix it. I let out a bitter laugh. Fix it? Emma, I just got dragged into a dark office and nearly thrown into a car. These people don't just leave you alone. Her face drained of color. They found you? Oh, they found me, I said, stepping closer. And now I have a little message for them. She shook her head frantically. Mark, don't. Too late. I pulled out my phone and held it up. The screen was still recording. I got everything, I said. Your confession. Every word. Emma's eyes widened in horror. Mark, please. I took a step back, slipping the phone into my pocket. You and Brian wanted me to take the fall. But now? It's your turn. Before she could move, headlights flashed outside the window. Matt's truck. Looks like my ride's here, I said coldly. Emma stared at me, realization dawning in her eyes. I'm sending this to the cops, I continued. By morning, you and Brian will be answering for everything. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. For once, I had the upper hand. I turned and walked away, leaving her frozen in place. As I stepped outside, Matt rolled down his window. You good? I exhaled, my chest lighter than it had been in weeks. Yeah, I said, climbing into the passenger seat. I'm finally good. As we drove away, I didn't look back. For the first time in a long time, I was free.